Hello, Instagram, and hello, YouTube and Facebook. It is great to be with you. I'm Joel Montgomery, and I'm so excited to start this new live with you here for Good Marketing. I am the co-founder and CEO of our company, For Good Marketing. And so what are we about? We are a digital marketing agency that helps entrepreneurs to grow their business and their impact through virtual events. And that's why today we are talking about virtual events. The title is Why Virtual Events Are Best. And you may be asking, are better than what? Are better than in-person events. All right. So make sure you stay till the end because we are going to be talking about two virtual events that we've put on recently and are going to give you a bit of a framework for how you think about your virtual events. So if you're a company and you haven't already started leveraging virtual events to bring clients to your door, you're missing out. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So thank you for joining us. We really appreciate it. So let's start by talking about what is a virtual event. Now, I don't know about you, but when I hear the word virtual, sometimes it sounds like virtual reality. And we all know that Mark Zuckerberg just announced Facebook is changing its name to Meta. So maybe you think about the metaverse. We all have goggles and we're meeting in that way. And the reality is that that's not what we're talking about. Okay. Our virtual event, it's simple. It's an online event. We're leveraging technology to bring people from around the world or, people that are not physically present together, right? Now, that is the simplified version of a virtual event. Now, here at For Good Marketing, we think about virtual events differently. We see virtual events as the best way, the fastest and easiest way to take a cold audience and to turn them into an engaged customers in just a few days. Now, you may be asking, what is a cold audience? What do we mean by that? Well, a cold audience are people that don't know you, right? They're people that have never heard about you or never heard about your firm or your organization. So they come in cold. And what we do in a virtual event is we take people and we introduce ourselves. They get to know us through that event such that then a portion of those people are actually going to want to continue to stay connected. Some of them may even want to purchase something. And so that is the process of taking leads or taking an audience that is cold, warming them up so that they're hot and they are interested in working with your organization. Okay, so virtual events, to summarize, virtual events are the fastest and easiest way for you to bring a cold audience, people that have never heard of your organization, and to warm them up to become engaged customers in just a few days. All right, so now let's talk about the different types of virtual events. All right, now we're going to be talking about 5 different types of virtual events. The first is a webinar. Now, the word webinar comes from adding web and seminar together, and you get a webinar. Web plus seminar is a webinar. And a webinar, it typically is lasting between 30 and 60 minutes. You can use it for a variety of different objectives. So you can have a webinar for lead generation. You can have it for audience engagement, for building credibility. You can actually make a sale at a webinar. You can simply have a webinar to provide information for people. So there's lots of different ways you can use that format of a virtual event. But a webinar is something that is very, very common in the industry. It's fairly easy to do, and it can have really powerful impact. So that is the first type of virtual event that we wanted to talk about. The second type of virtual event that we wanted to talk about is a virtual challenge. Now, you may never have heard of a virtual challenge, so let me tell you about it. A virtual challenge is typically between 5 and 31 days. So this is a multi-day event, okay? And it is designed to take that cold audience. So again, leads, people that have never heard of your organization, and they come and have an experience. They have a micro transformation. And I'll talk about what that means in a second. But they accomplish some kind of small objective, and all the while they're getting to know your organization. Now you can have a paid virtual challenge, or you can also have a free virtual challenge, and they have their pros and cons. But generally speaking, a challenge allows your audience members to have some kind of micro transformation. Now, what do we mean by that? That means that if you think about, all of us have problems in our lives, right? We want to find solutions to those problems. And so what we do in a challenge is that we offer a small solution. So instead of helping somebody go from A to Z, they're going from A to B. They're having a small micro transformation. They're getting one step closer to solving the problem that they have. Okay. Virtual challenges are incredibly powerful. And in fact, over the last 12 months, there have been over $100 million in sales using this strategy of virtual events. So they're very, very powerful, and people get very engaged in them because they're making progress towards a dream that they have or a problem that they need to solve. Got it? So that's the second type of virtual event that I wanted to share with you today. The third is a digital product launch. Now, what is that? This is a series of 4 videos where you are, again, you are helping a lead or helping a customer to be able to be aware of a new opportunity. Okay. Secondly, you have some kind of transformation that you're sharing with them. Thirdly, you're giving the blueprint, a high level blueprint. You're not giving away everything, but you're giving them a high level map or blueprint of how they go about solving the problem that they have. And then finally, you give them in the last video an opportunity to be able to purchase in a limited amount of time. Okay. This is a very, very powerful strategy. And this strategy, in fact, has been responsible for over $1 billion in sales. So it's been widely used all over the world in different types of niches. So everything from selling cakes to selling lawyer services to selling marriage counseling, all kinds of things, you name it, tarot cards, all different types of areas. This strategy has been successful. And this is something that, again, we love to do with our customers, and it has incredible results. Now, the fourth type of virtual event that I wanted to share with you is a virtual summit. Now, these last two, number 4 and number 5, are really more kind of copies of the types of events that you would see in person. Okay. So the virtual summit is simply a multi-speaker event over one day. So it's typically either a half day or a full day event, and you have multiple speakers that are talking about a particular topic. Okay. So you're leveraging technology to bring a bunch of speakers to talk about a particular topic. So that's a virtual summit. And then finally, the last type of virtual event that I wanted to share with you is a virtual conference. And these have become a lot more popular, especially since the pandemic came around. You've got a lot of these in-person events that had to pivot. Either they canceled their in-person events or they pivoted to a virtual conference. And so as the name kind of sounds like, it is a conference type experience, but in the virtual environment. So you're leveraging technology to connect people, and it can also have really, really good results. It tends to be more of a complicated type of event. So there you have it. 5 different types of virtual events that you can leverage for your organization or business right now. Again, there's the webinar, the virtual challenge, you've got the digital product launch, the virtual summit, and the virtual conference. All of them have the pros and cons, and we're not going to go deep into each one, but we just wanted to kind of give you an overall view of different types of virtual events that you can run for your organization. All right. So now let's pivot and let's compare in person with virtual. Okay. Let's look at different characteristics, and let's compare and contrast and which one is better. All right. So we're going to be looking at these. Number 1, ease. Number 2 is cost. Number 3 is scale. number 4 is engagement, and number 5 is persuasion. So we are going to be comparing in-person and virtual in those 5 different characteristics. Okay, so first, ease. What's easier, an in-person event or a virtual event? And I would argue that in-person is more complicated. Why? Well, you've got to choose a venue, right? You have to have some place that you're hosting this event. Typically, you have to have, it may be in a hotel, or you need multiple hotels for all of the different attendees that are going to come. Then you've got your suppliers. So you've got the caterer, you've got the technology people, you've got the people that are doing all the signage. You've got multiple suppliers that you've got to deal with to be able to bring and make that physical in-person event happen. You've got the menu. You've got to decide what you're gonna be providing people. You've got to figure out, okay, what's the menu for the coffee and what are the dinners? And I mean, it goes on and on and on and on. It's not easy to put together an in-person event. Now, obviously, you can have simpler types of in-person events, but there's lots of logistics involved. Now, if you compare that to a virtual event, there are a lot less logistics. Of course, there are logistics involved, but there are a lot less because you don't need a venue, right? Because it's happening in a virtual environment. You don't need to serve people food, right? So you don't need people that are, you don't need staff members, as many staff members as you would have in an in-person event. So it's just a lot easier to be able to set up a virtual event versus an in-person event. Now, one of the biggest factors is travel, because you don't have to travel when you have a virtual event. You don't have to travel. Neither do your attendees. And so it's possible for you to be able to get a lot of people from all over the world to be able to come to your event. So we would argue that in terms of ease, a virtual event is significantly easier than an in-person event. Now, I don't want you to think that it is easy. It's not, because if you are setting up a thoughtful, strategic virtual event, there are still lots of logistics involved, but we would argue that those logistics, compared to all the logistics for an in-person event, it's less. All right, now secondly, cost. And in cost, what's interesting is virtual events tend to be 75% less expensive than in-person events. And you can imagine why. No travel, no food, no hotel, less staff, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's just simply a lot cheaper to be able to host a virtual event as compared to an in-person event. So once again, virtual events win with cost. Now, let's talk about scale, okay? On scale, when you have an in-person event, you are limited by the number of people in that your venue can hold, right? If you can only afford a 100-person venue, then you're limited to 100 people, right? If you can afford a $30,000 stadium, then you can only have 30,000 people that attend your stadium. So if you're somewhere in between, you have a limiting factor of how many people you can host at your in-person event. Now, the beautiful thing about technology, we all know, is the fact that it is limitless. It's limitless. You can have as many people as you want to be able to join your event. And the good thing is that they don't have to be physically present. You don't even have to have people in your same time zone. You can have people from around the world. And I've participated in a number of different virtual events where we're doing it here in the US, and you've got people from Asia that at 3 a.m. are tuning in to the event. So in terms of reach, it's no comparison. You can have way more people attend your virtual event than you can in person, right? So that is a huge, huge factor when you are comparing, should we do in person? Should we do virtual? And the reality is there are also hybrid. There's more and more hybrid types of events that has something in person and also is able to leverage technology. So it's important to remember that in terms of scale, a virtual event has huge, huge potential. It has huge It's much, much stronger than an in-person event. Now, let's talk about engagement. And, probably the common belief is that people tend to be more engaged when they are in person versus when they are virtual. And, the reality is that I think there's some truth to that. But let me bring you some statistics so that you can kind of put everything in context. So, number one, I thought this was really interesting. Only 6% of exhibitors and 34% of attendees said trade shows had helped meet their business objectives. So here is a physical in-person trade show, which is very common around the world, right? I've done many of those around the world. And only 6% of the exhibitors, the companies that are going to kind of share about their company, and only a third of the attendees are saying that it met their business objectives, right? So the reality is, just because something is in person doesn't mean that everybody's having a good experience. And we've all been to in-person events where people are looking at their phone. They are in person, but in reality, they're virtual because they're sitting there flipping on their phone, doing other work, whatever. So just because you have people that are in the building doesn't mean they're paying attention, okay? So it's important for us to remember that fact. Now, I thought this was interesting. A 2003 Roper ASW survey found that 55% of business professionals gave their full attention during a face-to-face meeting, while 23% gave their full attention during audio conferences. So the reality is that if you are virtual and you're on your phone and you're at work, it's easy for people to be multitasking, not paying full attention if they're virtual. And I think that's one of the downsides to virtual is that, yes, we may have a lot of scale, but a fewer number of people may be paying attention than if we were in person. So in that case, I think in person has a little bit of a leg up, but there's lots of things that you can do to keep a virtual audience engaged. Okay. Now, the last area that I want to be looking at as we're comparing in-person with virtual is the area of persuasion. And you may believe that people are more persuasive in person than virtually. And the reality is that there are some studies out there. In fact, I found a Harvard Business Review article that said that a face-to-face request is 34 times more persuasive, more successful than an email. So if you're making a pitch to somebody, if you just see some random person on the street and you say, "Hey, would you sign this form for me?" Or would you spend 1 minute and let me ask you a few questions? People are much more likely to accept that in-person engagement than if you were to send the exact same information over email. And that makes a lot of sense, right? But the truth is that you can have a boring speaker, right, who is in person and nobody's paying attention to that person. Nobody's being persuaded. Or you can have an extremely persuasive person virtually where everybody's engaged and everybody's persuaded. So I would argue that in terms of persuasion, that it's really more on the individual, on their communication abilities than on the technology, on the medium, if it's in person or virtual. So there you have it. 5 different kind of points of contrast in person versus virtual. And we would argue that 3 of those are benefiting virtual, and that would be the ease. A virtual event is easier. A virtual event costs significantly less. A virtual event has way more scale. Sure, it can have a little bit less engagement than an in-person event, but in terms of persuasion, both of them, I would argue, are relatively equal. And so we here at For Good Marketing, of course, we love in-person events, but the reality is that we believe the wave of the future is virtual events. And so if your organization is not leveraging virtual events, you are missing out, okay? You're missing out. And we would love to help you if you want to figure out how you can take your events strategy to the next level by leveraging virtual events, okay? Now, let me tell you a few examples of how we have used virtual events here at For Good Marketing. Okay. Now, a couple of events that we've put on recently. One is called Fight Free Marriage. This was a digital product launch. So, if you remember the 5 different types of virtual events, this is number 3. This is the 4-part video series. Okay. So, we did that. We had over 700 people that signed up for that event. And the second event that I wanted to talk about was the Back to School Challenge. And this was really more of a social service, because this was at the beginning of the pandemic, or kind of in the middle of the pandemic in August of last year, when nobody knew what was going to be going on in school. And so what did we decide? We decided to put on an event to be able to help parents figure out what they could do to keep their children safe, what they could do to be able to be prepared for this once in a lifetime back to school season. And we had over 200 people that signed up for that event. So I want to talk about these 2 events in a simple framework. So if you're thinking about hosting a virtual event, I want you to think about the famous who, what, when, where, how, why. Okay, what we all learned in elementary school. Let's take those basic principles and let's apply those to virtual events. Okay, so I'm going to talk about these 2 example events for you in that simple framework. So firstly, why? When you're thinking about the why are you hosting the event in the first place? What are the key objectives for you? What do you want to accomplish with your virtual event? Now, let me talk about these 2 examples of these events that we put on. So firstly, Fight Free Marriage. So what was the point? What were the objectives of that event? Well, firstly, it was to teach married couples how to stop fighting, right? Fight Free Marriage makes sense. How to stop fighting. So that was the first objective. Secondly, to grow the experts, our clients' social media presence. So in these virtual events, typically what you do is you have a bunch of online advertising that goes out. You're able to bring in a number of people that have never heard of your organization, and you're able to give them an experience. And that's what we did. And so we were able to grow his social media presence through that. Thirdly is we made an offer for his online course. So what you do in this event is that you give a bunch of content for free. You help people make some of those micro transformations. And then you say, hey, if you want to go deeper, we have a solution for you. And that's what we did. So we sold their virtual course through that event. So those are the objectives for Fight Free Marriage. Now, for the Back to School Challenge, the objectives were different. The first objective was equip parents with the information they need and the tools they needed to thrive in the back to school challenge, in the back to school season, rather. So that was the number 1. Number 2 is we also made an offer for an online course. So we gave a bunch of information, a bunch of relevant information that parents wanted. And then we gave people an opportunity to go deeper, those that wanted to. So those are the ways, the whys that we had for those 2 events. So when you're putting together your virtual event, think about why you're doing that. All right. So next, let's move to what. The what of the event. And what do we mean by this? The what is the name going to be? What is the branding? What is the super promise, etc. Now, you may be thinking, okay, I know what name is. I kind of have an idea of a brand. What in the world is a super promise? A super promise is simply what you are promising for the event. So what is it that people are going to get out of the event? Okay, this is really, really important. You don't want to be vague. You want to be very specific. And you want that super promise to be connected to one of 2 things: a key desire that your audience has, or you want it to be connected to a major pain point that your audience is feeling. Okay, a desire and a pain point. Got it? So your super promise, and this is when you go to the website, when you go to the landing page, you are always going to see this tagline of the event. So people know, oh, okay, I sign up for Fight Free Marriage, and this is what I get out of it. So you may be asking, okay, what was Fight Free Marriage about? Fight Free Marriage was about stop fighting and create the happy marriage you've always wanted. That was our super promise for that particular event. Tells you, so anybody who's been married has probably fought at one time or another. It's something that's very common. So people want to figure out, how do I stop? And on the flip side, what do they want? They want to have a happy marriage, right? And so that's what we were stating as the super promise for that event. Now, for the back to school challenge, what did we do? We kind of focused in 5 different areas, that event. And so there were kind of multiple kind of sub promises. We stated it this way. So back to school challenge is a free 5-day challenge to help parents keep your kids safe during back to school. That was about, we had a pediatrician that talked from a health perspective. Secondly, learn the secrets to virtual education. So we had a remote work specialist that was there to help parents. Number 3, become a remote work ninja. Number 4, redefine success at home. We talked about family culture. And number 5, keep the peace at home. So we had a certified relationship specialist, marriage counselor who came and helped people understand all the stress that they're dealing with, how what they could do with that, right? So that was the promise of that event. So when you are putting together your event, you need to be thinking about, what are we going to call it? And when you think about a name, your name doesn't have to be the same as your company name. It doesn't have to be the same name as your product. You want the name to be something where you can look at that name and you know immediately what it's about. Okay. So if you have something vague, people read that and they're like, huh? What is that? You're going to not have a lot of people sign up for your event. But if they are able to see it and they know in an instant, oh, I know what I'm going to get from that event, there's going to be your conversions are going to be much, much higher. You're going to have a lot more people sign up for your event. So make sure that your name is clear. Okay. Your branding, you need to be thinking about, what are the colors? Again, you don't have to necessarily have the same colors for that particular event as your organization. You can, you cannot. There's lots of different creativity that can come involved, but you need to be thinking about, what is the look and feel that we want to have of our event. And then lastly, you want to make sure you talk about your super promise. Okay, who is this event for? Okay, who is your target audience? The better you are able to specify who they are, the better you can serve them, right? So the way that we thought about this in the 2 events was this. For Fight Free Marriage, we were targeting couples between 35 and 55 who are struggling in their marriage. Okay. That was kind of the target. And the reality is we had kind of a paragraph describing them. And it's good for you to be able to even name and describe in great detail who you are targeting. Okay. And then for back to school challenge, who were we targeting? Parents with elementary age kids. Okay. That was kind of the segment of people that we were targeting that event. So you need to make sure you're clear on who you are targeting for your event. Now, moving on to when are you going to host the events? So both of these examples that I've been giving you, Fight Free Marriage and Back to School Challenge, we hosted them live between 8 and 9 p.m. Eastern time. Now, why did we do that? Because you got to remember that when you get in the virtual world, you need to be thinking about where your audience is going to be. So in both of those events, in our online advertising, we targeted the United States. And so we had people in Eastern time, Central time, Mountain time, and Pacific time. So 9 p.m. Eastern is 6 p.m. Pacific. And so in that way, we were able to make sure that we were targeting and so that our customers were able to watch. So not everybody was in the middle of work. So that's why we chose 9 p.m. Now, the reality is that we even had people from Europe that were participating as well. And many of those people watched the recording of the event, so they didn't participate live, but we had a number of other people that participated in the recording. So it's important to think about, where is your audience? So we talked about who, where are they located? And then you need to figure out what is the best time for your event to fit into their schedule. Okay, so we're almost done. We've got 2 more. We want to talk about where. Okay, where are you going to host the event? Now, for Back to School Challenge and Fight Free Marriage, we hosted those events on Facebook. All right. Now, you may be thinking, why did you host those events on Facebook? Well, Facebook is a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because most everybody has Facebook. They don't have to sign up for another technology. And if you have some other website or something, it's a lot less likely that people are going to do that. Certainly for a free virtual event. If people are paying hundreds of dollars, they're going to be much more likely to go to another platform. But if it's free, make it easy on people, because the easier that you make it, the simpler it is for people to sign up and to participate. So you need to be thinking about where you want to host. And you also need to be thinking about where, in terms of the different technologies that you're going to be using. So you need to be thinking about communication technology. So that would be kind of how are you sending out your emails? If you're using a streaming service, like right now I'm using something called StreamYard that helps us to stream. Lead generation. So how are you getting the leads? How are people signing up? Are they doing that on your website? Do you have another software that you're using in order to get leads? Advertising. So there's all kinds of different technologies that you need to have and use. And many of them are very, very good. It's just a matter of choosing your tech stack and what is best for your organization. So you need to be thinking about where you're going to be hosting. Now, how are you going to get the word out? This is critical. Because let's be honest, you can have the most amazing virtual event ever, but if nobody shows up, what's the point, right? As the saying goes, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears, did it really fall, right? If you had a virtual event but nobody showed up, was it really a virtual event? Probably not, right? So you want to make sure that you have a strategy in place for how people are showing up to your event. Don't just put it all together, make it all pretty, and not think about this. This is fundamental. So how do you have people show up for your virtual event? Number one is paid advertising, and number two is organic. So we'll talk about both. So paid advertising, you can leverage Google so that you can have Google search, you can leverage YouTube, you can leverage Facebook and Instagram. Those are kind of the behemoths. There's lots of other kind of areas where you can use paid advertising. And so we have multiple strategies to be able to do that here. So that is one of the key ways. If you've got money to invest in online advertising, it's a way that you can fill the seats, right? And the beautiful thing about this is that if you already have an email list, if you already have a list of clients, one of the beautiful things about online advertising is that you can upload that to a Facebook or to Google, and then you can find what's called a lookalike audience, which is really, really cool. Well, how does that work? Well, what happens is, for instance, you upload your list. Facebook looks at all of those people and says, what do these people have in common? And then it goes to its over 1 billion users and figures out who looks like these people. And then you're able to send ads to those people. And so it's much more likely that those people are going to like what you like, because you already see all of these characteristics that are in common for your existing customers. So the reality is that both Google and Facebook, they're using machine learning. So they're going to be knowing things about your customers that you don't know about your customers. So it's incredibly powerful. If you're not using paid online advertising, you are missing the boat. This is where everything is going, and we'd be happy to help you with that. But make sure you are doing this. And I just want to caution you, you can also lose a lot of money if you don't do it the right way. Okay, it's really important to have professionals that know what they're doing, because literally a few of the wrong clicks and you can be hemorrhaging money. But when you have somebody who knows what they're doing, they're able to choose the right characteristics, you can make a lot of money also by online advertising. You just have to know what you're doing. So that's the first way. The second way is organic. Okay, what is organic? That means that you already have This is essentially free. So you have paid and free. So organic is you already have an email list, right? You already have customers, so you're able to send information to them. You can use Facebook groups, for instance. You can join Facebook groups and you can kind of promote your events in those places. There are online bulletin boards where you can promote your event. There's lots of different places that you can promote your event for free. So whichever you do, you have to make sure you're thinking through how you're going to get people in the door, the virtual door, to your virtual event. So there you have it. From our perspective, virtual events are the future. Of course, we will continue to have in-person events, and we love in-person events, but it's very difficult to beat the fact that virtual events are easier to set up. They're significantly cheaper than in-person events. They have way more scale than in-person events. And so whatever you're doing, make sure you are leveraging the power of virtual events. And here at For Good Marketing, we're specialists in virtual events. It would be our honor and our privilege to be able to help you think through a strategy of using virtual events in your company or your organization. So thank you so much for your time and attention. If you have any questions, you can always DM us here at in our Instagram or on our Facebook page. You can visit us at forgoodmarketing.com, and we look forward to hearing from you. And stay tuned, because we are just beginning to have weekly lives about virtual events, about kind of leveraging technology in your company, about online advertising. So stay tuned. We are going to have more of this content coming your way. Thank you so much for participating.